property's status, and the pricing may be reflective of that misrepresentation. Therefore, a lot of issues could occur, of none which are pleasant. So I actually had this occur where I was a buyer's agent. The home being offered was advertised as being on septic, and I knew they had installed the sewer lines being on sewers. I knew they installed the sewer lines in the neighborhood within the past year. So when I went to show the property to my buyers, they were all excited about it until I asked the seller's agent, can I see a copy of the abandonment certificate for the old septic system? And the agent said, what's that? I said, you don't know what the abandonment certificate is? When they take out the old septic, they have to give the seller, that owner, a certificate that the septic was properly abandoned, just like an underground storage tank. Oh, I don't know anything about that. So then I said, do you mind if I ask the seller? She said, go ahead. I asked the seller. She goes, I don't know of anything like that. So now I got to go down to the building department in town to find the information. And the building department tells me this: the house was never converted to sewer. It's still on septic. The building department would have a copy of the abandonment letter. And since they don't, they tell me the house is still on septic. So I went to the selling agent and I said, your house is still on septic. Oh, it is? The seller told me it's on sewer. That's the wrong answer. The answer was, it was my mistake for not investigating, so please forgive us and we'll adjust the price accordingly. In other words, I was dealing with not a very well experienced agent who didn't know what her job was. Your job as a listing agent is to confirm this information. Now, you don't have to take it to the nth degree. I still, believe it or not, still carry overalls and work boots in the trunk of my car, just in case I need to do some investigating on property. I've been known to crawl in crawl spaces and in dirty, cob-infested, rat-infested, basements to look for information. Well, I'm not saying you have to do that, but some way you're going to have to confirm information one way or another. So get yourself a pair of work boots and coveralls to make sure that if you have to, you can go inspect and find out. However, it's not required that you get yourself dirty doing this. You could always say, subject to the buyer's inspection that would confirm this information or not. That way, then you're off the hook, but then you're being lazy. So when you are responsible to get information, then you're also responsible to investigate to make sure that that information is correct. And if you find that the property is not being disclosed of properly by the seller, then you must, regardless of what the wishes of the seller is. Hey, Tim, don't tell them about the crack foundation, please. It's going to ruin my ability to get my full asking price. Mr. Seller, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm duty bound to disclose material defects in properties so that all parties know about them. And yeah, we'll require a reduction in your asking price because of the condition of the property. Or do you just want to try to pull the wool over the buyer's eyes and then they'll find out about it in a home inspection, which is the case, and then say, forget you and forget the deal. We don't want to have that happen. So honesty, in my opinion, please guys, in my opinion only, honesty is always the best policy when it comes to disclosure. And I told you the other day, disclose, disclose, disclose. And when in doubt, disclose. You have nothing to lose by being honest. So you have to disclose any known defects. And each licensee must fully cooperate with all other New Jersey licensees in the sale of property unless specifically ordered not to by the seller. I don't want you to cooperate with those other brokers. Well, in that case, Mr. Seller, if you don't want me to cooperate with other brokers, then you're going to have to authorize me to not do that through what's a document called oh crap, I just lost it. Boy, yeah, this is what happens when you have too much coffee in the morning. An exclusive agency representation where it says, Mr. Seller, you do not want me to advertise the property in the multiple listing service or cooperate with other brokers. You want me to list the property and introduce the buyers myself. In that case, I need you to sign a special form. It's called a waiver of broker cooperation, which means you know that the best way to sell a property is through me cooperating with other brokers in the real estate MLS, but you're saying don't do that. So other brokers don't know about your listing. In that case, only I then can produce a buyer that I would qualify, introduce the property, and sell the property for you. But that reduces our ability to sell a property dramatically, Mr. Seller. But if the seller wishes it, then I would do it. I would caution him against it. But if he demands it, then I would. And in fact, if the seller is somebody of notoriety, like a sports figure, I don't know, a TV or movie personality, and if the public finds out they're selling the house, well, everybody and their grandma, like the ships, will come streaming in to see the property, even though they're not qualified. I can't control what other brokers do, Mr. Seller. If they introduce buyers that aren't qualified, I can't control that. But I guarantee you, if I introduce a buyer, he's qualified to buy that property, or else I wouldn't bother introducing him to the property. So understand, guys, we want to cooperate with other brokers unless the client specifically says don't. And I don't think I have to go over this point again, that commissions are what? All commissions are negotiable between the client and the broker. You work for the broker, so you're the mouthpiece for the broker. My broker says I need to get 6%, sign the agreement. I'm not paying 6. What would you pay? I'd pay 4. Hey, Mr. Broker, will you take 4? No, get 6. I can't. Then what are you going to do? You may have to refuse a listing if your broker says he needs 6. You won't get a 4% listing. He won't allow it. Well, if you can get 5, get 5. But then you got to get 5. If you can't get 5, then you can't get the listing. So it's up to your broker to determine that. And all listing agreements for the sale of 1 to 4 family homes must contain specific notice on the negotiability of fees. Mr. Seller, just so you know, in New Jersey, all commissions are negotiable. And along with the listing, as we talked about on Chapter 4, Anti-Discrimination Laws, whenever I do take a listing, I have to also present the Attorney General's memorandum. If you recall our conversation, that was a form that said, it was called the Notice at Listing, that says, "Dear Mr. Seller, your agent is a licensed real estate agent in New Jersey, which says he cannot discriminate. If you have any intentions of discrimination, you must tell your broker now so he refuses to get into a relationship with you." So therefore, we have to introduce this Attorney General's memorandum whenever taking a listing for sale or rental of residential property. And the last item on this page is that, again, reiterating, every exclusive listing must have an expiration date, period. Now, pricing the property and how to do a CMA. But before I do, this is our last thing to discuss before we review. Was there any general questions for follow-up about what we have discussed so far? Hey, well, anyone know if I'm seller's agent? If I'm seller's agent, would the buyer broker be considered a sub-agent? No, absolutely not, Brenda. A seller didn't disclose a known encroachment issue on the survey he did last year, and didn't disclose it by providing an old survey from 40 years ago that shows no issues. Wow, sounds like somebody's trying to mislead somebody. The buyer finds out about this issue a day before closing, and after having a new survey done, is seller liable for not disclosing the reimbursement of the buyer's expenses? Sammy, I'm not an attorney. I can't give you any legal advice here, but I will say this. It would seem to me that seller should be responsible in some manner. But again, I'm no attorney and I can't give you legal advice. Can you clear up what a sub-agency? We did discuss this much earlier, but real quick, sub-agency means they work for the broker who's the listing broker. That means if they have a buyer, they can't represent that buyer as a subagent, because the subagent would represent the seller of the interest of the seller only, and the buyer, no interest in helping them get the best job. So subagency means you work for the client that the other broker works for, or that your broker works for. Can you please tell us all the documents that need to be given on listing in addition to Attorney General's memorandum? No, Matilda, because that's your broker's requirement to inform you about that stuff. I'm only telling you what you're required to know for passing an exam. Your broker will inform you about all the documentation. I did go over subagency. Is the main difference between exclusive agency and exclusive right to sell that the exclusive agency, the seller is not obligated to compensate broker? Correct, Jessica. No other questions? Good. Let's move on. Now, pricing the property. Now, guys, please, if you're doing other things, stop. Listen to me. Pricing property can be and will be one of your greatest abilities or assets to perform. Why? Because pricing is everything in today's market. Everything. A property going to market that's not priced correctly doesn't sell. If it's overpriced, doesn't even get showings. What? No, I'm being very serious. First of all, let's have a real quick discussion. We live in a free market economy. So let me ask you, who sets prices in a free market economy? Sellers, buyers, or realtors? Who sets prices in houses? Buyer, seller, buyer, supply and demand, that's not the answer. Market value, that's not the answer. Seller and buyer, market demand, that doesn't answer the question. Buyer, seller, buyer, seller, the agent, transaction happened. I don't know what that means. Seller, broker, seller. Okay, thank you guys, appreciate it. All right, so there seems to be a general consensus of confusion. That's expected. Seller sets the price. Okay, Andrew, thank you. But here's the answer. No, sellers do not set prices. Realtors, no, realtors don't set prices. Then who sets the price? Buyers, in their offers and negotiations, determine pricing of individual items in any given market. What? But I want that amount of money. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. You can want a lot of things. Doesn't mean you're going to get them. I want to get $500,000 for my house. Well, buyers are only willing to pay me $375,000. So I'm not going to get $500,000 for my house. I'll get $375,000, but I won't get $500,000. Could I list the property high and negotiate lower? You could, but there's a big danger in that. Well, I want to get a better price than what you're offering. Well, guess what? My obligation, under my fiduciary obligations and my code of ethics, say that I must truthfully portray to you the value of the property in today's market. And according to the studies I've done, buyers will pay X amount of dollars for this property. You're asking why. My question to you is, would a buyer pay that much money for a house that they normally wouldn't pay for? And if so, what sets your house so apart from everybody else that they pay so much more money for? Because mine is the best house on the block. I've heard that too many times. I have the best property, that's why they pay more. Really? By $100,000 they pay more? Absolutely, I have the best house. Why do you have the best house? And this is what one woman actually told me one time. I was doing business in Woodbridge. Because I have the biggest bay window in the neighborhood, and it gives much more light into the interior of the house and looks so much more dramatic from the street. So let me get this right. You think your house is worth $125,000 more than everybody else's houses because you have a bigger bay window. Is that correct? Yes. I said, ma'am, did you know that your homeowners across the street, your neighbors, for about $10,000 can go out and get a top of the line bay window like yours, maybe even better. and put in their house. So how do you come up with 125,000? Well, that's what I believe the house is worth. Well, I'm going to tell you, no. Telling people that they're wrong is not an easy task or concept to comprehend. Oh, it's very, hey, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't be insulting. You have to handle this with a matter of tact and diplomacy. Your brokers will teach you the wording, the technique, and the dialogue and the process to help educate consumers. My job is to merely tell you, you have to know how to price the property correctly. And I'm going to caution you, never take an overpriced listing because you're going to lose money. It's a matter of fact. However, saying that with a grain of salt, in the market that we're experiencing at this exact moment, doesn't even matter what you price the property out. People will buy it, it seems. It's just a bizarre situation in the market right now. There's so little demand because of the supply and demand issue. There's so little demand and still so much demand, but very little supply. So whenever a property comes on the market, it's usually got 4 or 5 offers within the hour or two it's been on the market in the MLS before anybody's even seen it. Full price offers, no contingencies, 30,000 over asking, without even seeing a property. Why? Because people are desperate to buy something. It's bizarre. The market right now is completely bizarre. It's challenging, to say the least. So normally, in normal markets is what we're really trying to teach you here. What happens when things are fairly stable in a market, where supply and demand is more realistic? So how do I price a property? Well, first of all, the seller tells you what they want to get for your property, for their property. I want to get 500,000 for my house. Great. Well, tell me everything about your property you can, including what's in it, what's made of, what the style is, the age of it, et cetera, taxes, square footage, blah, blah, blah. Because, Mr. Seller, I'm going to compare your house to every other house in town that's like yours and see what they're asking and see what they're selling for. And I'm also going to do a report based on expired listings that didn't sell that are like your properties. So what do you need to know? I need to know everything about your property. And I'll go through a myriad of questions. I'll use the seller's disclosure report plus my extra 100 questions I'm going to ask him to find out everything I can. Then I'm going to take all that information and then we're going to log into my multiple listing service and click on the MLS program in the MLS. It's called a CMA program in the MLS. I'm going to click on that. Or your broker has an app he wants you to use because it's branded under his name. It automatically links to your MLSs, whatever. That's where you're going to have to find out from your broker, am I going to be using your type of your information, or can I use the MLS to get the information? Either way, it's going to use the MLS to get the information. Now, your brokers will teach you how they want you to prepare these things. The MLS teaches you the technique of doing it. I'm going to give you the general overview. So this is what happens. After getting all the information on the subject property, the property I'm going to be selling and pricing, I would then go into my multiple listing service and hit the CMA program, and it brings up a search criteria screen. Now, if you've ever done a search on the computer, how do you generate the most amount of responses to your inquiry? Well, that's easy. You put as little information as possible in there, and you get as maximum number of responses. Precisely. Therefore, let's say, I'm going to use a whiteboard here. I'm going to subject property, the one that we want to price, the subject property is a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, colonial, which is a Victorian, right? And it has a 1/2 acre property. in a 2-car attached garage and a full finished basement. Okay, so that's the basic criteria of your property, Mr. Seller. What I'm going to do is go and compare this subject property to houses that are on the MLS, that are for sale today, that are like your property. So, oh, by the way, the one last thing I forgot to put is the town. Let's say it's Northvale. It's in Northvale, V-A-L-E. North. It's up northern New Jersey, above Norwood. Northvale. So Northvale it's in. So when I go to my CMA program and start entering search criteria, I'm not going to look for as few as responses. I want as many. So I'm going to enter in Northvale. And I'm going to put in 4-bedroom home. And that's it. No other criteria. Northvale will give me the town I'm looking in, 4-bedroom, any and all houses that are currently active. I'm going to do an active search, properties that are for sale on the market today that are 4 bedrooms in Northvale. And it's going to give me a whole bunch of responses, maybe 30 or 40. Then I put in 2.5 bath. And then I whittle it down to 25. Then colonial. Then it comes down to 15. Half-acre property, 10. 2-car attached garage, 7. Perfect. Stop. 7 is a perfect number to compare your subject property to these other 7 properties that are currently on the market that are in Northvale, 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, colonial, half-acre property with 2-car attached garage. There's 7 other homes just like yours on the market, but there are still differences. So when I do my search criteria and generate this list of responses, now I'm down to 7. Anywhere between, let's say, 4 and 9 is a good number to use for comparisons. 7 is still, I could whittle it down further, but 7 gives a good variance. So what I'm going to do, Mr. Seller, is when I pull up these listings, I'm then going to finalize my search to those 7 houses. And I'm going to now compare your house to their house 1-to-1. So let's take the first comparable house. It's much like yours. It's in a slightly different area in town, which is less desirable. Therefore, your house would be superior in some manner, and that house would be inferior because of its location. Now, because of that, we're going to make a price adjustment to the property that's currently on the market that's in the less desirable area and add value to it as if it was in a more desirable area like yours. Then we could show that if your house was on the market like that one is, and because you're in that area and we adjusted their price to be in there, then we could ask X amount of dollars for that property. And then I'm going to take each comparable property that came up in a result and adjust it to be in line with the subject property. So now, Mr. Seller, after I've done my active search of listings that are currently on the market in the town that is like yours, we can show that buyers would be willing to pay anywhere from X to Y, low and high end, to buy your house. But that's just the first search I do. Then I'm going to go back into the multiple listing service, back into the CMA program, and perform a second search of recently sold properties that are comparable to the subject property. Doing the same kind of search, I'll whittle it down to maybe 6 or 7, and then adjust the comparable properties to be more in line with the subject property, by either adding or subtracting from values. So now, Mr. Seller, I can tell you, using this CMA program, that buyers are actually paying X to Y for your property. It matches the active pricing. So that seems to be pretty accurate. But then I'm going to do a third search of expired listings that match your criteria. Why? Because we're going to look at things like, number 1, days on market. Well, most of these properties that expired have been on the market for 375 days. Here's one for 620. Here's one for 180 and another for 95. That means they went on the market and then expired after quite a bit of time, or some time had expired. So let's then look at their original listing price. And oh, by the way, do you see how they started very high in the market? Buyers lost interest no matter how far they reduced the price. Buyers lost interest in that, and it didn't sell, it expired. So seeing where properties are being actively advertised for sale and their asking prices, seeing where sellers are actually paying for properties that are like yours, and seeing why properties don't sell in the expired categories, I have one question for you, Mr. Seller. What's that? In 6 months from today, do you still want to be in the for sale category? Do you want to be in the expired category, or do you want to be in the sold category? I want to be in the sold category. Then we need to price your property as sellers are willing to pay for your price of your house. That's how I would determine a CMA, a comparative market analysis, for the seller to help them understand what buyers are willing to pay for their house today in today's market. Now, again, markets change dramatically and suddenly. So when I do a search of sold properties, I don't want to go back more than 6 months or so to find comparable sales, because the market a year ago is different than it is now. And the market 6 months to a year from now is going to be different than it is now. So markets are very volatile in the real estate business. They move very quickly in certain directions sometimes. Sometimes they're very sluggish. It's an inefficient market. So by doing a CMA, a comparative market analysis, Mr. Seller, we can find that buyers are willing to pay these prices for houses just like yours. So my question then is, at this variance of a low to high end, where do you want to be to attract those buyers? Well, I want to ask more. So let's list it high and we can always negotiate downward. That's not a good idea. Why not? Because buyers know value. And normally in a normal market, if they see the value of your price versus what they're willing to pay is out of line, they won't even come to look at your house. And if they don't even come to look at it, there's no offers. So how are you going to negotiate something you don't have? Okay, so you got to give me some playroom here. Well, we can ask the high end of the spectrum. We don't want to go on the low end. I think your house is more justifiable at the high end, so let's find out what we can do at the high end. And we will get the buyers coming looking at the house. Because there's one thing I've learned in the real estate business, and my father told me this when I was a very young man, and I've proven it true over the couple of decades I've been doing real estate, is that the right price overcomes any objection. The right price overcomes any objection. And I learned it in a very personal manner. I was looking to get a listing and I saw that an expired listing had just occurred. So I called the owner and said, hey, I got to ask you a question. I see you had listed your property with another broker and it expired. And are you still thinking of selling your property? Yes. Can I come over and take a look, see your house? I'm unfamiliar with it. Yeah, but no one is able to sell my house. I said, okay, so let me just come by. So I went over and I talked to the guy. I pulled up his listing history. And then talking to the guy, I said, now I see the prices on the houses that we're asking. Was that your idea? No, that's what the brokers told me it was worth. So obviously that price wasn't real because nobody bought your house. Yeah, that's correct. Well, here's my CMA. Here's what I believe your house is worth, according to what buyers and sellers will buy. If we price it in this manner, I believe it will sell. But other brokers told me the house is worth much more. Well, obviously it's not, because it's not selling. Here's the hitch, guys. This house was on the railroad tracks. Now, I don't know if you've ever rented an apartment or lived near a railroad tracks, but it can be very disruptive to your lifestyle. But the fact is, it was a very nice house. And I knew there was a buyer somewhere for that property. The only problem was it was never priced right to start with. So I said, let's go on the market at this price. He goes, well, that's a lot less than the other brokers were telling me. I said, well, I do seriously believe your house is worth less than they were telling you because of its location. You know, I kind of suspected that to be the case, but you know, those brokers, they know more than me. Do they really? Well, let's take the listing and see where it goes. I listed the property. Within 3 days, I had a full price offer contract on the house. And the guy was like amazed. How did you do that? These brokers I listed with 3 already over the past year and a half, and they couldn't sell the house. And you did in 3 days. That's because at the right price, Mr. Seller, overcomes any objection. Guys, you have to understand that buyer perception is buyer perception. It's not the seller's perception. It's not the broker's perception. It's the buyer's perception. If they perceive an item not to be worth the asking price, they're not even going to go look at the house. If they believe it's priced right, they're going to go look at the house and make an offer on it. It's that simple. So as I started off the conversation, I honestly believe this and mean it. One of your greatest tools in your tool belt, one of the greatest things that you can use is the ability to price a house correctly for the market. And if you do, no one's going to be able to stop you selling houses. They're going to come and buy those houses because the prices are right. But if you don't price the house right, if it's too high, they won't even come to look at the house, let alone make any offers. You've got to price houses correctly. All right. Anybody with a question about this listing or pricing the property correctly? Anybody? At the beginning of the explanation, you mentioned MLS. Then you were saying CMA. Yes, I know this is the topic, but it confused me a bit. It was misunderstood, right? No. Kamala or Kamalit. I'm sorry. I'm so listening to the press. Kamala. I'm thinking your name is Kamalis. It could be. I don't know. Or is it Kamalis? I don't know. Whatever. And I don't mean to butcher your name. I'm just ignorant. So the answer to you is this. Yes, you're using the multiple listing service to find this information, but you're using a CMA sub-program in the MLS that you're going to use as a search engine to find matches in active listings, sold listings, and expired listings so you can prepare your CMA and print it out and give it to your seller. What are the remaining breaks? Oh boy, yeah, you're our topic, but 12 to 1, 2:30 to 3. All right, so we're good on this. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, good. We are good. But is it Sanjita? You have a question, and Michael Blum, you have a question. It's like eBay. I'm not going to answer that. There's nothing like eBay. When looking for a comparable house for pricing purposes, how many miles should I be looking within? Within the same neighborhood if you can, but certainly not outside the same town. You want to stay in the same neighborhood or same town. Neighborhood would be peachy keen. If a property goes on one MLS, does it need to go on all 8 of them? No, only the MLSs that you're a member of. What other sites or sources can be used to form a CMA? That would be up to your broker to determine, Umair. I wouldn't know of any. I don't use any. But if your broker knows of another way to get information about pricing of homes that are on the market or sold or expired, I don't know where they're going to get it from except from an MLS. Is there any other question? Michael, do you have a question? What? Okay, good. Anybody else with a question? Michael Blum, you have a question? Or maybe not. Okay, not seeing any other questions. I'm going to moderate the conversation. I'm going to pull up the review questions for the chapter. Give me just a second while I pull these up. And this is chapter number 10 that we're in. So here we go. Question number 1, again, answer in the poll section. Excuse me. A seller promised a commission to broker A if she saw the property, then, I'm sorry, if she sold the property, I believe it's supposed to say. Yes, sold the property. So the seller promised the commission to broker A if she sold the property, then turned around and made the same arrangement with broker B. the seller must be entering into a excuse me. A seller promised a commission to broker A if she sold the property, then turned around and made the same arrangement with broker B. The seller must be entering into a Now we're getting about a 50% response from the students, but that's what you want, then that's what we got. So those who did respond, about 65% of you are correct answering A. It's an open listing, correct. Open listing. Number 2, a seller arranged to let a broker be his only broker, but when the seller sold the property himself, he owed the broker nothing. Their agreement must have been a or an And again, from the limited response we got, about 80% of you are correct in answering B for boy, an exclusive agency listing, correct. Number 3, in the preceding question, the broker could have claimed the commission if their agreement had been a or an. And from those who have responded, about 83% of you are correct answering C, exclusive right to sell listing. And that's why I tell everybody your broker wants you to get exclusive right to sell listings, because it gives the broker the most protection against commission loss. Number 4, in New Jersey, an exclusive listing agreement must include a or an. Okay, from responses received, about 78% of you are correct answering B, definite termination date. I think I may have said every exclusive listing must have a termination date at least 4 or 5 times. I know I did. Number 5, a broker entered into an oral agreement to act as a broker for the sellers. To collect a commission for finding a buyer for the house, the broker must Awesome. 91% of you got it correct. A, deliver a written memorandum of the agreement to the sellers, complete with all details within 5 days. Yes, A. Number 6, a salesperson is taking a listing for a home owned by a married couple. The salesperson should we talked about this on Wednesday afternoon. Awesome. Again, guys, 94% of you are correct answering D. Obtain the signatures of both husband and wife. Excellent. Excellent. Number 7, under a multiple listing system, if broker A lists a property and broker B with another firm sells it, then 94% of you are correct answering D. The commission is shared between the two offices. Yes, we offer to cooperate and compensate. Is not guaranteed, so it must be spelled out. Number 8, a house was purchased in 1940 for $4,500. The elderly owner's daughter asked the broker to list it, instructed him to see if he can get as much as $85,000 because she's heard houses have gone up in value. The broker knows the property may bring $250,000. The broker should Hello, victory is ours. 100% of every, oh, it was 100%, but now it's only 96%, 5%. 95% of us correctly answered the question D. Tell the daughter that he believes the house is worth much more. Yes. Article 1.3 in the Code of Ethics, realtors when getting listings shall not mislead sellers as to value. Number 9, in the final analysis, selling price for real estate is determined by and about 2 out of 3 of you, 66% are correct answering C, the buying public. C is the correct answer. And finally, the last question for this morning's chapter. For which of the following reasons does the Attorney General require that the licensee must refuse to take a listing? All right, we're rocking these questions today. 91% of you got it correct. B for boys. Seller prohibits showing the house to immigrants. Remember, you can't discriminate. B for boy is correct. All right, real good job in the questions today, guys. Real good. Any follow-up questions before we start chapter 11, which we're going to be taking a hiatus from in about 15 minutes because it's lunchtime soon. Hang on a sec. What other